Hello and welcome to Wake Up America Ministries, January the 16th, 2022. January is half over, man. I tell you what, it just flies, don't it? But so the question for the day is, can a desert bloom? That's the question. But before we answer that question, I'm going to lay some groundwork for you. So in Exodus chapter 3, it starts off with Moses has an encounter with a burning bush, and he stops and he pays attention to the burning bush, and out of the burning bush comes the voice of God, and God speaks to him and gives him direction as to what his will for his life is. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read a couple of verses because what he's doing is he's directing Moses to back to Egypt where he came from, because remember he was born in a time when all the young babies were being killed, and he was put in a basket and floated down the river. He was found by Pharaoh's daughter, and then he was raised up basically as an Egyptian, even though he was Jewish. And then he killed a man in defense of another Israelite that was being beaten by an Egyptian, I guess, soldier. Anyway, so then he fled. So now here Moses has this encounter with the Lord, and the God speaks to him and he reveals to him who he is. And then he says this is the direction that he gave him. He said, "And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land, and a large, and to a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites." All right, so now Moses has his purpose, his mission in life, this will of God that's now been revealed to him. And God says, "Look, if you'll just be obedient unto me," and I'm paraphrasing here, okay? "If you'll just be obedient unto me, I'm going to take you to a place that's far better than anything you've ever known." All right. So anyway, so then we jump over here to Numbers 13. So we know that um, the 12 spies, they come to the River Jordan. The 12 spies are sent into the land to spy out the land, and I'm not going to go into all the details there, but essentially this is a report that the spies give, and this is Numbers chapter 13. All right, so, and I'm going to back up here from what I originally wrote down, and this is what it says. It says, "So they went up," and talking about the spies, "and searched the land from the wilderness of Zin unto Rehob, as men come to Hamath. And they ascended by the south, and came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the children of Anak, were. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. And they came into the brook of Eshcol, and cut down from thence a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bare it between two people, well, between two upon a staff. And they brought of the pomegranates and of the figs. The place was called the brook Eshcol, because of the cluster of grapes which the children of Israel cut down from thence. And they returned from searching of the land after 40 days. And this is the report that they gave to Moses when they crossed back over. It said, "And they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the children of Israel into the wilderness of Paran to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them, unto all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, We came into the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it." So they brought back proof that the land that the Lord had promised to the Jews, to the Israelites, was a great land flowing with milk and honey. In other words, it was plenteous. There was plenty of olives, and as we see here, there was grapes, figs, pomegranates, and so forth. There was an abundance there for them to go in, possess the land, and enjoy. Anyway, so then we know that, making a long story short, that Israel went through a series of, they went through the time of the prophets, the judges, the kings, and eventually they went into captivity on more than one occasion, but then they kind of went into what you call, I guess, a final captivity, the period of darkness, which was over 400 years until the time of Christ. And then we know that Christ came. He was crucified and he rose from the dead and all that. And then that was about AD 33 ish or so. And then in AD 70, the Romans, after a revolt, basically destroyed Jerusalem, and the Jews were dispersed throughout all parts of the world. All right, so then something happened. May 14th, 1948, after World War II, we know that Israel once again became a nation. They declared themselves to be a nation back in their native homeland, the homeland that God gave them. And if you can study this out for yourself, God gave them boundaries as to where Israel was going to be, from what rivers to the Mediterranean, from the north and to the south. But anyway, so the Jews, they returned, but it was not easy. It was not without conflict. It was not without great sacrifice by many really what you call great men and women that had to rebuild the nation the way that it used to be, because things had changed in the almost 1900 years since the dispersion had taken place. And one thing that I read said that Israel, this was well, I guess maybe whenever they inhabited land, but about 60% of the land that they came back into was desert. All right. Now we know that Isaiah 35 verse 1 and 2 has a prophecy that talks about this desert, and there's actually more than one desert in Israel, but this is the largest. It's called the Negev, and I may not be pronouncing that right, but that's how I say it. But anyway, so let's jump over there to Isaiah chapter 35 and verse 1 and 2, and this is what it says. It says, "In the wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it, the excellency of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord and the excellency, try to say that 3 times real fast, of our God." So anyway, so here we have this prophetic word that was given by Isaiah that the desert would bloom. All right. So now here we are in our time, and then since 1948, a lot has happened in the desert in Israel. As a matter of fact, if you go and you do some reading on that, you will find where the Israelites have, or Israelis, I guess you might call them now, have done a great work in the desert. So, well, how have they done this? So the question goes back to, can a desert bloom? Well, let me put it this way: can a desert bloom? Because this Negev desert's in the southern part of Israel. So if you were to pull up a map of that, it would show you where it's at. But did you know that this particular area of Israel only gets less than 6 inches of rain per year? So you think, well, how in the world do they grow crops in a place that doesn't get any more rain than that? How does anything survive 6 inches of rain in a year? Now, this is a 12-month period. Now, the northern part of Israel, by the way, it gets somewhere around, well, it depends on what source you read, but somewhere around 30 inches, between 20 and 30 inches a year. So northern Israel gets a lot more rain actually, compared to what southern Israel gets. And they say the farther south in Israel that you go, the actual less annual rainfall they actually get. So it's a very, very dry place. So how can anything in the world grow in something? I mean, we can't imagine trying to grow crops with only 6 inches or less of rain in a calendar year, much less in the growing season. Well, let me tell you how they did it, okay? Because this is all God. Because God said it would happen, and it is happening as we speak. So I'm going to just tell you some of the ways that Israel, with God's divine providence and guidance leading them, how this is now becoming a reality. So the first thing I want to tell you is this, that they've been very creative in their agricultural practices. And if you heard anything about Israel at all, I mean, they are constantly developing new ways of doing things, new technologies. They have a great, some of the leading scientists in the world that study this stuff. But anyway, so through agricultural practices, technology, modern technology, and science. So one of the things that they do is the desalination of seawater. So they take seawater, run it through a process, and basically it takes the salt out of the water, and then they can use that water to water crops. All right, and then it says that they recycle their wastewater. So about 85% or so of their wastewater gets recycled and it's used for crops. And then brackish water, we've all heard of brackish water. So if you were to go to the coast, and the brackish water is a combination of fresh water and salt water. So it's not all salt water, but it's not all fresh water, and really it has not a whole lot of value. But the Israelis have found a way to take brackish water, and there's certain trees and shrubs and crops over there they can actually use this water on to make them flourish. Another thing they have, and this started, I didn't realize this, I didn't realize it was this old, a drip system. Um, the drip system, the Israelis invented this drip system. It began way back in the 1960s, and of course, they've continued through modern technology to improve its performance and to make this drip system work. And so, what this drip system does is it actually targets the water to where it actually needs to go. It's not like over here in America where they just set up these giant, big, long irrigation, dig these big wells and these irrigation pipes that we see out on cornfields, and they just spray everything down with water. That's not how Israel does. Now, some crops they have to do that, but there's a lot of most crops they don't. They use this drip system, and it targets the water. So what it does is it really puts the water to its best use. Something else they use is they have a lot of greenhouses, or what they call net houses, where they can control the environment inside these greenhouses, and they produce just bunches and bunches of food. It says here seed breeding is one thing. I guess that's kind of like maybe like over here, there's I guess genetically altered seeds. I don't know if that's what that's talking about or not, but anyway. So then this one thing I read said that they had reclaimed about 20% of the desert. Now you think about it. That's a ginormous feat. So now I want you to imagine a desert. So when we've seen these old westerns, like with Clint Eastwood and people like that. And in this desert, all you see is sand. There's nothing growing. It's just sand, sand, sand. Occasionally you might see a sidewinder or something like that slithering across, but you don't see really very, very, very few signs of any life whatsoever that exist out there. And but the Israelis have found a way. Now, let me tell you, it's amazing because of all the technology and all the progress that they made in taking parts of the desert and restoring it and making it produce food is just amazing. And so it has come to a point where there's even countries, and even some countries that were basically sworn enemies of the Israelis, and that's Egypt and Morocco and India and some other countries that have a lot of desert that they're now, I guess they're kind of either purchasing this technology or learning the know-how from Israel on how they too can take their desert lands and turn them and make them bloom. So, Israel is not just keeping this to themselves, they're sharing the technology with the world. It's a very interesting fact. I didn't know this. It's just that Israel grows 95% of their own food for almost 8.9 million people. Can you get that? They grow 95% and produce. Now, this is cattle and sheep and all that they need to sustain themselves. 95% they import what they have to because there's some things they can't grow, like sugar and cotton, and enough cotton. I think they try to grow some cotton over there, but they can't. Israel's a very small place. It's really about the size of New Jersey. So you think about that. They have really done a great work. Of course, with God's divine guidance, of course, God gets all the credit here because God said this was going to happen. Will the desert bloom? And it has. Not only that, but Israel exports. That means, when I say exports, we all know what that means, right? They ship it to other places. They don't just keep it at home. They ship it abroad. citrus fruits, I get that out, citrus fruits, olives, olive oil, dates, almonds, peppers, and many other products that they export out because they grow more than they need. It's amazing that such a small, tiny country like that, who's under the watchful eye of everybody that hates a Jew, can do such miraculous, mind blowing work, and then they share it with their neighbors. They'll export it. Now, of course, if you follow this, there's the BDS movement, which basically means boycott, divest, and sanction Israel, and don't buy anything that's been exported from Israel. Come on, folks. I mean, really? I mean, that's another subject for another day. But anyway, what's my point? Is God said it was going to happen, and it has, and it's going to continue to happen, even as better technology comes along, as better ways to conserve water and recycle water and do that. And it's pretty interesting too. Just probably a couple of months ago, I saw something advertised on Jerusalem Dateline News, and this was a product that was developed in Israel. Get that, developed in Israel. That they have a machine, and you can actually buy them for home use, and they're developing this for commercial use. But it's a machine that you just basically set up anywhere, and this machine is able to take regular breathing air like what we have here, like what everybody has, and somehow it separates the water molecules from the oxygen, and it extracts the water from the air. And you can buy these machines in various quantities that will, I think some, like for household use, it'll produce a gallon or so a day, and it just extracts it out of the air, uses very, very little power. I actually thought about buying one, so if the lights go out, we could at least, if we can't run the well, we could at least produce a gallon of water a day. But anyway, I'm just saying, it's amazing the technology that Israel's had and how they've used it and how they're sharing it with the world because God said. Ain't that something? So I don't know if this has done anything for you today, but this is kind of the main point here. If God said it was going to happen, and He's given you a promise, and the Bible is full of promises for those that are faithful and trust Him and live and depend on Him. Well, first you have to be saved if you're going to receive the promises. That's another subject for another day. We've actually had messages about that. But my point is this. Not just this prophecy. We just talked about a few weeks ago about the prophetic series that we've done for the coming of Christ and the birth of Christ. And we're probably going to do something similar with that leading up to Easter. Just to show you that God's Word is truth. And His truth, it will set you free. And folks, we need truth today. We need all the truth we can get because right now we live in a society, you don't know who's truthful and who's not. I mean, it's very, very difficult to tell, who to believe. But you can always believe God's Word is true. Well, folks, that's all we have for you this week. I hope this has been an encouragement, a blessing, and a verification for you that God's able to do everything He said He will do. Anyway, if you don't have a home church, you're welcome at the Rock Worship Center. Sundays, 10 o'clock for Sunday school. We have classes for all. Sunday morning worship at 11, Sunday night at 6, and Wednesday night at 7:30. If you don't have a home church, or if you're not going anywhere at all, if you're just kind of, I just didn't really like the place where I was going, and I just don't really know where I can plant my feet, you're welcome at the Rock Worship Center. And that's anyone and everyone. Come as you are. You don't have to dress up nothing fancy because we don't. Blue jeans and a shirt, and that's how we roll. But you're welcome there. So come see us, visit us. Of course, they live stream the services, but we'd really like to see you in person more so than live stream. But enough of the commercials. We thank you. We love you. Share this. Sow seeds into somebody else. Help us to share the gospel with people. And Lord willing, we'll see you next week.